Can you imagine Heroes' Square, once covered in black drapes, the statues hidden, and the entire square transformed into the country's largest funeral catafalque? Arpad, Saint Stephen, Archangel Gabriel. But did you know that Stalin's statue almost ended up here too, and in the end stood just a stone's throw away? We are at one of Budapest's most famous locations, and now we will walk through how this square became a true national symbol. You'll find out how the area transformed from a marshy pasture into a city park, and finally into one of the most important squares in the country. By the end, you will definitely look at one of the country's most photographed squares in a whole new way. Let's get started. First point, sand and marsh. At first, it was only the edge of City Park. Picture Pest at the turn of the 18th and 19th centuries. Where Heroes Square stands today, there was nothing but sand, marsh, and sometimes a herd of cows. This was then the city's edge, a land of shifting sand and wetlands. Over time, the area began to be landscaped and urbanized. Trees were planted to keep the wind from blowing away the sand and to provide shade for walkers. The marshy sections were drained, making way for a small lake and a green, inviting park where people could finally come to picnic, stroll, and relax. The main entrance to the park back then was a circular space called the Rondo. Later, the famous Stalin statue stood here, and today it is the site of the 1956 memorial. At that time, the area around Heroes Square was still just a quiet, nameless park. The wind of change began to blow in the 1870s. That was when plans began for the Grand Boulevard, now known as Andrassy Avenue. The aim was to create a beautiful, elegant road from downtown where people could walk or ride horses all the way to City Park. Meanwhile, something exciting was happening underground in the area. An engineer named Vilmos Zsigmondy began drilling because he believed thermal water was hidden beneath City Park. It took 10 years, but the effort paid off because the thermal water finally burst forth. For such a sensation, something special had to be built. This led to the construction of the Gloriette in 1884, designed by Miklos Eibel. In 1895, however, it was demolished to make way for the Millennium Monument and the Ezra Daves Square, as Heroes Square was then called. The structure was later rebuilt on the top of Zechenyi Hill, where it still stands today as a lookout tower. Second point, the transformation, the birth of the Millennium Monument. As the end of the 1800s approached, Budapest was undergoing a huge transformation. It was becoming bigger and more elegant, and its residents were preparing for one of the nation's greatest celebrations, the 1000th anniversary of the Hungarian conquest of the Carpathian Basin. That's when the big idea came. At the end of Andrassy Avenue, there should be a truly spectacular, monumental memorial, something like a triumphal arch for the nation's history. In 1896, the square first received Lajos Fromer's triumphal arch-like main gate, and after the exhibition ended, work began on the monument we can still see today. The goal was to present the most important kings, leaders, and decisive moments of Hungarian history, but with a twist. The statues of Habsburg rulers could not be left out, as Austria and Hungary were still part of the same monarchy. So, among the Hungarian kings and leaders, a few emperors had to be discreetly added. By the summer of 1897, the tallest part of the monument was ready, the statue of Archangel Gabriel, holding the Holy Crown and the cross. The Archangel was placed atop a 36-meter column, reinforced inside with a thick iron rod to ensure the huge bronze figure would never topple over. By the autumn of 1901, everything was in place, and Archangel Gabriel towered high above the entire boulevard. Meanwhile, work continued on both sides of the square. The semicircular colonnade was built, and by 1905, the famous statues began to appear. For example, Matthias Hunyadi, Bela IV. On top of the colonnade, huge allegorical statue groups were also installed, symbolizing work and prosperity, knowledge and glory, war and peace. In the following years, the square continued to gain more figures. The statues of Koloman the Learned and John Hunyadi were among those installed. Below the statues, reliefs were installed depicting the most important scenes from each ruler's life. In 1912, the equestrian statue of Grand Prince Arpad was completed. It seemed that soon everything would be in place. By 1914, only a few reliefs were missing. But then the First World War broke out and everything stopped. Interestingly, even in 1914, the square still had no official name. Despite the monumental statues already towering there, most people still referred to the area simply as City Park. Third point, from kings to red flags. The revolutions of Heroes Square. The First World War not only claimed countless lives, but also shattered Hungary's confidence. The monarchy collapsed, the country lost huge territories, and the people were left disillusioned and angry. No one wanted to see Habsburgs among the greats of the Hungarian nation anymore. The square was left with almost only empty pedestals, becoming a true symbol of a new era. Then, in the spring of 1919, came the Hungarian Soviet Republic, and something extraordinary happened at Heroes' Square. The monument was covered with huge red drapes, bearing in gold letters Marx's famous words, "Workers of the world, unite." In the center, Arpad's place was taken by Marx's portrait, and on either side, temporary statues of a worker and a peasant appeared. Can you imagine it? Where once kings and chieftains had stood, communism was now celebrated. The square became almost like a stage set for political propaganda. It's true, this all lasted only 133 days, but it forever proved that Heroes Square is no ordinary place. Here, the nation's era can truly be defined. When someone wants to mark a new beginning, they show themselves here. Fourth point, a memorial to heroes, a new beginning between the two world wars. After the fall of the Hungarian Soviet Republic, the old order slowly returned, though things were never quite the same as before. There was talk of restoring the monarchy, but the throne ultimately remained empty, and Horthy became the country's regent. Interestingly, some Habsburg statues were even returned to their places. Franz Joseph was remade, this time in coronation robes instead of a military uniform. Other kings' statues were also replaced where possible, and the parts left unfinished before the war were finally completed. The accompanying chieftains of Arpad were finished, along with King Louis the Great and the missing reliefs. In other words, 33 years after it was first planned, the Millennium Monument was finally truly completed. But there was one very important addition. In 1924, to honor the fallen heroes of the First World War, the government ordered a national memorial to be built here. A design competition was held, and the winning entry was a simple yet monumental limestone block. No decoration, no ornament, just two dates, 1914 to 1918. And on the back, the inscription, "For the 1,000-year borders." This was not only a tribute to the heroes of the war, but also a bitter reference to the losses suffered in the Treaty of Trianon. The new memorial was inaugurated in 1929 on Heroes Memorial Day, and with that, the square was finally declared complete. In 1932, it was officially given its name, Heroes Square. Fifth point, the altar of the nation, celebrations, religion, politics. From then on, Heroes Square became a place of national remembrance, often referred to as the altar of the nation. The largest celebrations were held here, scouts and youth organizations marched here, and even the church embraced the location. In 1938, Budapest hosted the International Eucharistic Congress, a global Catholic celebration. For this occasion, Heroes Square underwent major changes. In 1937 to 38, the remaining trees were cut down, the flower beds were removed, and the entire square was paved with decorative stone. It was then that Heroes' Square took on the distinctive paved, open form it has today. Before that, it had been much greener and more park-like. During the Congress, the Millennium Monument was transformed into an open-air altar, and Mass was held here before a crowd of several 100,000 people. Sixth point, new statues, new ideas. Communism transforms the square. During the Second World War, Heroes Square fortunately did not suffer as much damage as many other buildings in Budapest. After 1945, for a few years, the square once again became a center for political mass gatherings, with various parties holding rallies and recruitment events there. Then, in 1948, the communists seized power, and the so-called ideological cleansing of the square began. First to be targeted were the Habsburg rulers. The empty pedestals were filled with new heroes. In the communist view of history, leaders of national independence struggles were to be celebrated, especially if they were anti-Habsburg. Alongside the statue replacements, the reliefs on the pedestals were also altered. In the early 1950s, there was even talk of dismantling the entire Millennium Monument and erasing Heroes Square as a reactionary site. In the end, this plan was abandoned, but until 1953, during large state parades, the square was covered with red drapes bearing communist slogans. The main venue for major celebrations was moved to City Park, to the massive statue of Stalin. The 1956 revolution swept away Stalin's giant bronze statue, and the authorities once again needed Heroes Square. A new Heroes Memorial Stone, the work of Bela Gebhardt, was installed. By 1958, the communist transformation was complete. New statues, new reliefs, and a new memorial stone. Everything reflected the ideology of the regime. From the 1960s onwards, Heroes Square became more of a calm tourist attraction, used mostly for wreath-laying ceremonies. Seventh point, rebirth and remembrance. Heroes Square, today. In the late 1980s, Heroes Square once again became a stage for politics. On June 27, 1988, tens of thousands protested here against the Romanian village destruction program, and on June 16, 1989, the square provided a fitting setting for the reburial of Imre Nagy and his fellow martyrs, an event that symbolically closed the communist era. After the regime change, the square retained its status as a ceremonial site. In 1991, Pope John Paul II celebrated Mass here before hundreds of thousands, and later it hosted major political rallies and commemorations. Since 2008, the spectacular National Gallop horse race has filled it with life each year. Between 1996 and 2000, the square underwent a major renovation. The 1938 decorative paving was restored, the statues were refurbished, and a new politically neutral Heroes Memorial Stone was placed where the old 1956 one had stood, bearing the inscription, "In memory of our heroes." In 2001, it was declared a national memorial site, and in 2002, together with Andrassy Avenue, it became part of the UNESCO World Heritage. Today, Heroes Square is both a tourist attraction and a historical symbol. It has survived monarchy, wars, and dictatorships, and still silently tells Hungary's thousand-year story to all who pause beneath the statue of Archangel Gabriel.